Finance Committee meeting to order Tuesday, April 12th. We do have a quorum here. Does anyone have any communications that they wish to share?
I guess I do have one.
Oh, yep, Mike?
Yeah, this will be my last meeting
Oh,
as I was elected to the Dane
Yep.
County Board, so I'd like to continue here, but I think the mayor has other people that are willing to serve, so
okay.
appreciate the opportunity anyways. It was great.
All right. We appreciate having you on here and the opinions and information that you brought forth to the committee.
Thank you.
And Joey's indicated that he's not going to continue as well.
Okay.
Just busy times more than anything, but he enjoyed his time on here as well, so.
All right. That means we won't be at another meeting then, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay,
Because we'll
then-
be reorging next week.
And for the record, then we thank Joey for his service as well. And then we don't have any reports to do in this meeting. We'll catch those up in the next one. So then, moving into committee business at hand, then I would entertain a motion to approve the March 22nd finance minutes.
Motion to approve.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Are there any questions, comments, discussions? All right. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Are any opposed? All right. Meeting minutes are accepted. First bit up is a resolution approving reduction in GIP Glacier Moraine LLC letter of credit. And this will go on to council tonight yet.
If you remember, the committee basically passed the idea of the voting on the resolution, just asked me to draft the language, so the language is in here. So you're basically going to be repeating it now with the exact wording.
All right. Dave, can you recap just a little bit on what this one goes for in case anybody wasn't on the meeting in the last?
Certainly. The GIP Glacier Moraine agreed that in the letter of credit, they have to have a certain dollar value, and it gets reduced every time there is construction in the area. So they had construction value that equated to $99,235 for the increased and assessed values. So that's what we're proposing, that the letter of credit gets reduced by.
All right. Is this the one that was the that has all the buildings with the smaller businesses in? Which entity was this one again?
I believe that it is that
Okay.
one.
All right. All right. Does anybody have any questions on this? I know we went over this one. We did go over the details of this one in the last meeting. If no questions, then I'd entertain a motion to approve this to council.
So move.
Second.
Second, perfect. Any other further discussion, questions? All right. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Are any opposed? All right, we will recommend that one to council later tonight. Next item up, I'm going to jump back and forth here. Next item is the initial resolution authorizing $710,000 in general obligation bonds for community development projects in tax incremental district number 7.
Dave, did you want to speak, or should I?
I can speak to it. I just didn't know if I should just pipe up or if you wanted to call me into action here or what. So, we actually had something in your packet that will address not only that 710,000 or whatever it was, plus the issue. Do you want me just to go through that?
Sure, Dave.
Okay. So in your packet, you have our pre-sale report. As you've heard me talk about these in the past, this is a report that really takes the planning that's gone into what we're going to include in the borrowing, what the projects are, and so it kind of documents that planning. The issue itself is for $5,480,000. I'm on page 1 now.
Are we on the same item?
We're taking, I asked if I could do basically the two in a row, because they're related.
Okay.
710.
All right.
Do you want to read that one too?
Yep.
So what I have on the screen?
Yeah.
All right, so the other that we're also going to do, or we'll take up first, will be the resolution establishing, so this is item 8 for everyone watching. The resolution establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed 5.48 million general obligation corporation purpose bonds, series 2022A. Okay, all right.
Okay, so
sorry.
these are related, and the reason that there's only 710,000 for initial resolution on the TIF is because in late January we approved a slew of the initial resolutions. In fact, we approved it earlier. We approved $2,815,000 for street improvements, $520,000 for sewerage, $360,000 for fire equipment, $400,000 for parks and public grounds, $225,000 for the River Park project, and then another $700,000 for TIF number 8. We took those up in late January, just so that when we got to borrowing time, that we wouldn't have to really worry about those having any issues. So the one thing that popped up when we were getting to this point was that there was a project that was kind of related to the TIF 9 project. There was some improvements that it made sense to do those at this time when that TIF 9 project, if that's approved, gets moving. So we're asking you to approve an initial resolution for that TIF 7 project that's related to the TIF 9 project as well. It just made sense to do them at the same time. So going back into the overall pre-sale report, which basically is what we're asking you to consider approving so that we can take this to the market, is $5,480,000. It's made up of all those initial resolutions that I just named off. Basically, the issue in the whole, like I talked about, it takes care of your 2022 capital improvement plan, which you approved basically last fall when we did that with Jamin. It did the street projects, fire department equipment, parks, and stormwater, and then the TIF 7 and TIF 8 projects. Down a little bit farther on the page, it talks a little bit about your debt capacity. Right now, at the date that we actually close on these bonds, you'll be at about $36,746,000 of principal outstanding, which is 55% of your limit. I believe that your limit is actually 80% as an approved policy. So you have to the statutory limit, you have $30,300,000 left of limit that you can borrow against. As far as the term and call, there'll be a call date out in 2032, where the last 10 years of the issue could be called if you either have cash on hand where we could reduce the size, or where we can refund the whole thing with better interest rates. So that's something to consider out in 2032. We will have it on page 2, Mayor. We'll have a rating call with Moody's. I believe that hasn't been scheduled yet. I think Peter just sent that out for getting that scheduled, but we'll have a call with Moody's to kind of go over what your financial status is, what kind of projects you have going on, the economic development. Really, it's a chance for the city to kind of brag about the shape it's in, because it's in pretty good shape and has some good development going on. And I would say, based on the size of the city, we probably won't move up to a AA1 anytime soon, but a AA2 is a really good bond rating for the city of Stoughton. Method of sale, we're going to sell these competitively, so we'll put these out for people to bid on from either local, regional, or national underwriters. On page 3, top of page 3, as we've done in the past, we're going to ask that you authorize either the Director of Finance Controller or the Treasurer to accept the bids on the day of the sale. This is kind of what you've done the last 2 years. It's really a delegation of the approval. Typically on a sale day, we would come to you on a city council day and you would approve it at that meeting. This is a way that we can get to the market maybe a little bit faster. It won't be hugely faster, but in these days with interest rates going up basically 10 basis points per week, we want to get there as soon as we can. There are some things that we set as parameters ahead of time. The issue, obviously, we don't want to exceed $5,480,000. The maximum bid, we don't want the underwriter to give us more premium than 106% of the par. And really, what makes that number important is that we need, if they do put premium on this, which is a way for them to get the coupons to look favorable to the investor, that what we have to do is by state law, we have to spend that premium within the first 3 years. And what that does is it goes against your interest expense. So it's basically money on hand to reduce your interest expense. The minimum bid is tied to basically the maximum amount that an underwriter would take for compensation, so we don't want any less than that amount. The next item is actually one that I'm going to ask you to consider making a motion at council to bump this up a little bit. As I said, the interest rates have really kind of gone crazy lately. Like I said, they've been going up about 10 basis points per week. 4% is good right now, but we're selling in 5 weeks, and so another 50 basis points on a number is basically something we don't want your sale not to happen because we can't accept the bids because it comes in too high. So what we'd like to do is at least give the underwriters, what we'd like to call it is a Mack truck to run through. It's really, we just don't want a super crazy bid that's got really high interest rates, but we also want to give flexibility enough that the underwriters will bid. We did have a case last week where that true interest cost number percentage was not high enough on a client. We actually had to postpone the sale, and I just think, just to be safe, if we could bump it up maybe 50 basis points to 4.50, we're ensuring, I think, that we'll have a bid for sure. I don't think we'll be anywhere near that, but it's better than canceling a sale and putting it off. So that would be a recommendation I would make to you, just because things have gone, I think in the last month we've gone up 100 basis points, which is basically 1%. And I just hate to have something happen because you've got things in motion. You want your capital. We want to get it to you as fast as we can get it. So any delay will just make things more expensive. As far as the maturity schedule, we have the ability, if they do put premium on this, that we can move about $100,000 between the blocks. And the reason we'd want to do that is because we have on your schedule, when we look at the tax impact schedule, we have where we've kind of stabilized the tax rate, at least in your 5-year plan. We're trying to stabilize that tax rate. And so if they put too much premium on the beginning issues, what it'll do is it'll really lower that amount and kind of take us out of our planning. And so we want to keep that tax rate right where you approved it when you did your capital plan. Do you have questions on that? Because I know I'm asking you for something that we don't typically do, but we're not typically in a market that interest rates are so volatile.
So Dave, just if they're lowering or giving us premium and we have to lower the rate, you essentially put more principal to the beginning to try and increase.
Correct.
Okay.
Which in the end actually, reduces the interest expense on the lower years because we'll probably pull it up from those interest rates that are a little higher at the bottom of the scale. Any questions? Because I wanted to pause on the parameters just because I was asking for something that's a little different, and the motion can be made by the council per bond council. So I checked into that ahead of time just to make sure.
Well, I think it's good to have some flexibility built into it because we just don't know.
Well, I think 4% will be okay, but I just, just the way things have been going, I kind of feel like, another 5 weeks until we can sell because we got to go through the notice to electors for that 1IR, that initial resolution. I just hate to have, if it's going to keep going like that, I'd rather have you have the safety of being able to sell, because if we've signed contracts for construction, we need to be able to pay them, and so putting things off, making it more expensive may not be a good idea.
Right.
Going on to page 4, the only risk factors that we'll tell you about is that GO bonds, GO notes are backed by the tax levy. And so when we have TIF districts or stormwater utilities making payments on behalf of those entities with either their user fees or increment revenues, if for some reason there was a reason that those entities could not make those payments, the city council would be asked to levy a tax for it. I believe that the TIFs that we're working with are doing all right, and that the stormwater utility could raise its fees if it needed to. So, your other service providers, it's Quarles and Brady's your bond counsel, Associated Trust is your paying agent, and Moody's is your rating agency. The calendar is, the pre-sale that I'm presenting to you is tonight. We'll do a call with at least Dave, if not the mayor, to kind of go through the official statement. That's the document that we send to the underwriters who take a look at you and say, okay, we're going to bid on you. We like what we see your AA2, that kind of stuff. That's the document that they use to make their bid. That conference call with the rating agency will hopefully be somewhere around the week of May 9th. And then if you approve the parameters resolution as you have in the past, that would be the day that either the finance director or the treasurer would sign off on that. And then June 9th is when we would be getting you the funds into your bank account. So just real quick to go through the schedules, the first schedule on page 6 is just how we come up with the sizing to take to the market. All of the project costs are what the city has provided to us. We have estimated issuance costs. Many of them are based on the size of the issue. One of the items that'll be coming out of here is the Disclosure Council. The city decided that they didn't want to take that service. You haven't used it in the past. I had Quarles reach out to Dave just to kind of see if he had an interest in it and what he had done at Dodge County, if maybe that was something that he would be interested in. So he had his communication with them and decided that he would have Ellers work with him to review the official statement. Rating is based on the size of the issue. Anything over $5 million takes you up to $19,000. Anything below $5 million is $14,000. So that's a threshold. Paying agent is that associated, and then the underwriter fees is right now it's in at the maximum of like $12.50 per thousand of bonds, but that's typically a line item where the underwriter will reduce it to try to get the bid. And so then with a little bit of earnings on interest and rounding, we have to be at a $5,000 block. That's where the 5,480 comes from. The next schedule on page 7, lots of small numbers, but this is where we are solving for the tax levy. In the capital plan, Jamin's plan was to come in with like $100,000 of increase each year, and I think if you went back to the 5-year plan, you'd see that we had $100,000 of tax levy built in each year for those 5 years. The growth we assume will actually lower the tax rate. We have a real conservative 2% in here, so we're really solving for that tax levy. The next pages 8 and 9 are really the breakout of the specific purposes that you're borrowing for. So we have streets. There were certain streets that we're only, I think they're like seal coating, those kind of things where we're only doing 10 years. So we kind of divided up on useful lives for breaking that out as well. So those are how we're repaying those purposes. And then on page 10 is your debt capacity. Your policy is 80%. You're going to be at about 53% at the end of 2022, and then it falls down over time, and that's a sign of flexibility because you'll have room in the future to do your projects. The only other thing that I included, it kind of shows you a little bit about the interest rate market is page 11, and you can see since January we've basically been climbing the whole time. So it's been averaging out about 10 points per week since then. So it's kind of ugly. I don't like seeing it. I really like those low rates we've had the last few years. All of my clients do. So it's not fun coming in and saying that things are going up, and hopefully what we have built in for a scale in here is conservative. But even when looking at the first block in here, when I did this for Dave, $1.70 for the first year was close, and I think we're more at 1.95. So even in the time that I've done this report, they've climbed. Last week was actually really bad. I think we went up 15 points just last week. So happy to answer any questions.
All right, I do like this approach that we do with this, where we send these out to bid and then give the authorization to do that. I think we've been able to certainly get, you know, a little bit better rating on the bond issues.
Yeah, we like to do it on days where there isn't as many sales, so we try to keep it off of Monday, Tuesdays, and that way we have some underwriters that might bid on us that would have been more involved with the things going on Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah, I think anything that we do in order to save us a little bit of money in the long run is always well worth it. Does anybody have any questions about this one? I don't want to say this is almost like routine, but, you know, we've seen this flavor of things before, so. All right, as long as no one has any questions, then I would entertain a motion we'll approve this as presented, and then we'll make the amendment in council for the 4.5% then.
So,
Two different resolutions, looks like.
Yeah, so, the first one, let's see, we'll take them in order. So first, for the resolution on the 710,000 for TID 7,
yeah.
So moved.
all right,
Second.
all right. Any other questions on this one? All
Alderman
right,
Schumacher. So when you do the motion at council,
Yep.
what you'll want to say is that you want to amend the parameters resolution to have the, let's see how it says it in there. To amend the maximum true interest cost to 4.50.
yep. And then, let's see, because Mayor, what order do we have these coming in council? Are these in the same order that we have them in here?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Because I think, you know, the same question will come up, like, if we do it for, so then I guess we would have to run an amendment on both of them technically, right?
Well, what I could do is just introduce the initial resolution so that you know why that's separated from all the other ones, and I can say that one first, and then you could vote on that one, and then I
Okay.
could go into the pre-sale report.
All right, I think yeah, that'll be clear then.
Okay.
Okay. Then, all in favor on the $710,000 resolution, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Are any opposed? All right, so we'll recommend that one to council tonight. And now I'll entertain a motion for the 5.48 million resolution.
So move.
Second.
Any other questions or discussion on this one? And this is the one that we will amend then in council or parameters amendment to 4.5%. No other questions? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Are any opposed? All right, we'll recommend that one to council later tonight. All right. Next item up is the discussion and possible action regarding taxable debt issue of $219,824 for tax incremental district number 8 regarding riverfront environmental remediation.
You want to go, Dave, or should I?
I can introduce why it's separated out.
Okay.
So in your capital listing that you approved this year, we had Quarles and Brady kind of review the items that were in here. And the one that they did not feel could be financed with tax exempt debt was this environmental remediation, because they reviewed the developers agreement and found that there was some what's a good word for it?
Private activity?
Yeah, private activity guarantees that kind of kicked in, that they thought that this would be better off financed with a taxable bond issue. I believe that we aren't going to actually go to the market with this one, and I think maybe, do you want to take it from there?
Correct. In your packet, I've got just a screenshot from the Commissioner of Public Lands. The current rate out there is 4%. So that's probably the route that we're going to go unless you wanted to contact a local bank and see if they would bid on it. If we do go that route, we have to let them know it will not be bank qualified and it will be taxable, so that we don't have that issue. So I guess I'm looking for some direction from the committee, whether you'd rather go with the state loan or try and get local banks to participate.
What do you think the probability would be that we would be able to get a better rate from a local bank?
I don't think you would get a better rate locally. We actually tried that when I was up in Dodge, rather than going through a negotiated sale like this, or bidding process, and the rates actually came in worse than if we had done a bid process. We had 3 or 4 local banks participating in that.
Okay.
The other thing with the state pool is that it's prepayable, basically. There's a period where they don't let you, but basically it's prepayable at any time. And so if for some reason the TIF district was doing well, we could pay that off right away too.
Okay. Anybody have any thoughts on that at all?
I just had a question. I didn't hear, do we have an estimated cost yet for that work? Or a borrowing amount? Or is that still
It's
to be
just, the
determined?
state just charges you a flat 4%. There's no processing fees or Moody's or anything like that. It's basically going to a bank and signing letter of credit.
I guess my question is, though, do we have an estimated cost on the remediation work yet?
Oh, I'm sorry. That I'm going to defer to Rodney.
Is that the
I don't know if
220?
it's been finalized, there was the
Yeah.
original.
Yeah.
We have an original estimate, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, that
So this is for the-
220,000, I think.
I can't remember.
219,824 is
Yeah.
what we
That's what's in the
stick with that.
resolution part of it, I guess, so.
Do we know when we may have a better estimate?
In the next 60 days, we should have it.
Okay. So I can then contact the state, to find out the parameters and if they need exact amounts or whatever, but we'll start that investigation then.
Is there, is there a dollar threshold at which it wouldn't be advantageous to use the state's loan for it? Like say it goes to 500,000, is that off the table then, or?
I can check with them, but I think at these levels, they're not going to have any step rates or anything like that, but I'll find that out for certain.
That's pretty well set in stone, so unless they were to raise their rates, which they just did it, so everything that he's showing that is pretty new. But that 500,000, I would say if there was something that might get you somewhere else, that might be a market, would be over $1 million.
Okay.
Otherwise, I
Okay.
think this is a good place. There's just a packet that you fill out, there's a resolution you guys will pass. And then if you actually made it for whatever, if it was a little bit more, it's a draw loan kind of a deal, so you'd only pull out what you need.
Okay. All right. I guess my preference would be to go with the kind of the safety of the state pool. I don't know how others feel about that.
I would agree with that, yes.
So you're just looking for direction at this point rather than approval of any, because there's not a resolution or?
Correct,
just
because we don't know the dollar amounts, and I need to verify, as Dave said, if it's a draw loan or if we just get a flat amount, but
Okay.
now that I have direction, I can get more information from the state and get back to you.
All right. Nope, I think that's a good direction to go then. All right. Anybody have any other thoughts on that item? All right. You got enough to go on, Dave?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, perfect. All right, next item up then is consideration and possible action on resolution creating tax incremental district number 9, approving its project plan and establishing its boundaries.
I think I'm taking this one too. I did pass, I did have Dave pass out a presentation, it might be in your packet as well.
Yes, it's in the packet.
It's just maybe a condensed, it is a condensed version of the other document. If you did read through this as good nighttime reading, I'd happy to answer anything that I don't go through. But let me try to get through this because I see you have other things that you need to get to as well. I know Matt wants to talk pretty soon as well, so it's just a developer agreement. So, okay, so where we've been so far, on March 14th, we had the initial joint review board meeting, the organizational meeting, and they did have a couple of questions. They talked a little bit about how much the underpass that is in the project list would be, and that's actually a project that is kind of a TBD. It depends on if we have money for it. They asked, we kind of talked a little bit about the WIDA tax credits, and that relates to the LIHTC, what's the name of the actual development for the low-income housing?
Lakestone.
Lakestone? So that's something that they kind of asked about, and then somebody had some questions a little bit about land uses, the makeup of the residential. So those questions were answered at that meeting. We then held the Planning Commission public hearing. There was nobody from the public at the meeting itself or online. Nobody was signed up to speak. There was no questions from the public, and actually there was no questions from the actual Planning Commission as well. And I didn't have written down the vote, but I have written down there was 1 no and 1 abstain. Do you remember? I can't remember why there was a no, but anyway, so it passed the Planning Commission. Then tonight we're going to present to the City Council. I'll use the same document. And then on May 5th is actually when we have the Joint Review Board meeting planned. That will, if you actually pass it tonight, that will be the last kick at the can for the Joint Review Board. They would have to have specific reasons as to why it didn't meet the TIF law compliance. So as far as the next page, page 3, this is just a real basic TIF 101. I'll be quick about it. We have a parcel of land. It's got a base value. We create a TIF district. That TIF district puts in improvements. We use those improvements to pay for any kind of projects we've done or maybe incentives. When we get to a certain point in time, we can't make any more expenditures except some of those incentives or administration. And then when we get to the end of the TIF district, if we don't do some affordable housing extension, then that comes back onto the tax roll, and all the taxing entities get to tax across all of that purple and blue at that time. So that's kind of your quick TIF 101. The next page, I'm going to look at what's on the screen because, Rod, you remember that map that I thought I had a copy of that too, and I don't see that I have the updated one. So this map is actually the real map. When we were at the Planning Commission, we pulled out the Beaver Dam map, which wasn't really a very good map because it didn't really fit your situation. But this is actually the land use map. And then as far as the purpose of this district, what we're trying to do is have the developer provide not only housing, some affordable housing, and some commercial development, but we're going to use that to incentivize him. He's going to put in all those improvements, as well as incentivize the affordable housing, which is typical with affordable housing. They really need that municipal participation to get some of the WIDA tax credits that they applied for. And then those will also potentially pay for some of the Highway 51 corridor improvements, including a roundabout, some sidewalk, potentially an underpass. The goal of this TIF district is really to help expand some housing opportunities and bring in some commercial, bring in some low-income housing. And then the required finding on this type of district is that less than 35% of the district can be newly platted residential. So what that means is that when you look at the area of the TIF district, we can't have housing in more than 35% of that area. And we do meet that. I think we're at 29% if I remember my calculations. So you want to go on to the next page? I added something on this page that kind of shows the project costs. So we have that development incentive with the developer that I think you're considering tonight. That's the 8.598. We have the incentive to the LIHTC Lakestone project. That would be about 2.7 million. Those Highway 51 corridor projects add up to about 3.4 million. And then we have a little bit of administration that will be charged by the city for doing, accounting, planning, that type of stuff, consultants that might come into play. The next page is just the development assumptions. So these were provided, actually these were analyzed through the pro forma analysis that Frank Roman from our office did. And so he looked through these numbers and confirmed that these values are reasonable, and actually asked a lot of questions of the developer to make sure that these numbers were good. So those are the values that we're hoping will come in based on this project. I'm going to go on to the next page. Those total about $45.2 million. This schedule really is our way to calculate how much TIF increment can be generated from those improvements. So with a flat tax rate, which hopefully it stays flat, it doesn't go down like it did last year, we get about $16,600,000 of TIF increment if the district actually stayed out to the maximum amount of years. So that goes on to the next page, which is the cash flow, which shows that 16.6 million on the left. Really, we have one borrowing to do some projects. We have that repayment of that. Then we have the municipal revenue obligations, which are also called PAYGO agreements with the developers, which would be the Dvorak and the affordable housing. Those are amounts that have been set up within the pro forma analysis, and then a little bit of administration. And if everything happens, if the crystal ball is really clear, everything happens, the development happens when it's supposed to, the projects happen when it's supposed to, the developer puts in what they said they were going to, we could potentially close this district in 2041. And just so you know, as far as those developers, if they don't put in the value, they'll only get what we agreed to as far as the percentage of that increment. So if they put in less value, they'll get less incentive. So hopefully that was quick enough. I'm happy to answer any questions on the presentation or anything out of the document you might have seen.
I had a question if I could. So looks like the revenues are, I'm just looking at that last page, I think 23,748. Expenses are 14,545. So is that a net of 9,203,000 or thereabouts over the life of the TID?
I'm sorry, which numbers did you look at?
Oh, so I'm looking at the, and maybe I'm oversimplifying, so that's why I need help. But the total revenues, I'm on the last, I think, page.
Yeah, and I think I still have the old presentation, so let me I'm gonna grab the document so I have the right numbers in front of me. When you said the numbers, I was like, no, that isn't what I have. Okay. Could you ask that again? The
Sure,
23 million?
On that, I think it's on that last page.
Yep.
23,748 for total revenues.
Mm-hmm.
And then expenditures 14,545 thereabouts.
Correct.
So does that mean we net over the life of the TID about 9.2 million? Or
Yeah, so
something?
So what this says is if we stayed open till the bitter end, that we would potentially have 9.2 million of fund balance at the end. But you see where that yellow line is? Mm-hmm. When we get to the point where our fund balance or our cumulative increments have exceeded our expenses, are bigger than our principal outstanding in that far right column, which is a combination of the bond and the two affordable housing or the two MROs. Once we have enough money to pay those off, we'll close the district and pay those off. So they'll get paid at the date of closure. So we won't collect that 9.2. We'll collect up to 1.9. We'll pay out that 921,000 that's outstanding at that point, and then basically that difference, if it ends up being that much, will get split up between the taxing districts. So the school would get some, the city would get some. So it's kind of a, if everything happens, that's the year it would happen, and there'd be about $1 million that would be split up between the taxing entities.
So I might still not be getting something, but I remember, I was looking through, I was trying to refresh my memory, so I looked back at our finance meeting in December, and I remember that Jamin brought a memo saying that there had been some changes in the cumulative fund balance in 2042-ish was going to be about 2.4 million. So is that then our portion, or then we split that with, and I know I'm probably,
So
this
yeah, the
is from
difference-
old information, but.
The difference between the cumulative and the obligation outstanding at date, that date would be the amount that you would split between all the taxing districts.
Okay,
So you, whatever your share of the tax bill is, which I think
About
is
half.
actually,
yeah, that was in there somewhere.
I think there's a page in here that kind of shows a percentage. So, you know, you would get 37% of that leftover money, so that $1 million.
So what are we gonna end up with after 20 years? About? Once, like
I would
our
say you'd get
portion?
about 30 or $370,000.
Ballpark.
So we're gonna like break even, kind of, right?
Well, you're gonna get a lot more.
That's the intent of the TIFs, but
Yeah.
you've got all that assessed value then.
Right,
Yeah, what it does is it raises our base tax rate to that new level forever, basically. So every year, it's gonna be like the gift that keeps giving.
yeah. Although this TID is still gonna be a little less wiggle room than some of our
Oh, yeah.
others.
It,
So there could be still a whole lot of things that go.
Yeah,
The workforce housing really limits the leftover, I would say, on this one, but that's the trade-off in order to be able to accommodate that.
So are our things that we'd like to spend money on reflected in here?
The only thing that is not in here is the
That
underpass.
underpass, okay.
Right, which we anticipate will be north of this property anyway. But there's a possibility that it's within that half a mile of the TIF where we could potentially fund it out of here. More than likely, it might be funded with the next development going north.
You know, and one thing is, you know, with that $1 million, you know, basically the city has said if we're gonna do that, we're gonna do it with available increment. So instead of divvying that up, you know, maybe we're open another year and the underpass gets paid for with cash and there's really nothing left to split up. So it kind of depends on one, does everything go into the ground exactly how we have it here? And, you know, it's all kind of crystal ball, so.
And we're trying to schedule the underpass at the same time the DOT does the work in 2026. So realistically, the increment won't be there at that point, but you never know.
It's a decision the city could make to actually borrow for it if you
Right.
wanted to and put it in at that time.
Mhm.
Future decision.
All right, any other questions on the TID 9 approval? All right, if none, I'll entertain a motion to recommend to council
With the new resolution? The
for the new
resolution?
TID 9, yeah.
Yep, so moved.
Second.
All right, any other questions or discussion? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Or any opposed? All right, we'll recommend that one up to council tonight. Next item up is resolution approving agreement to undertake development of the 51 West development.
Want me to cover that one?
Absolutely.
Okay. We have discussed most of this agreement during earlier meetings, so I won't go back and cover all the territory we've already covered unless you'd like to get into some of those issues. At a high level, as you recall, this is a development agreement that in part is a kind of a standard development agreement that one would see in the context of a subdivision like this that requires the developer to put in the public improvements that are serving the project, and in part it's a TIF agreement. The things that were still outstanding the last time we discussed this were a look-back provision. That's now completed. We now have an exhibit attached that is a financial pro forma for the project that indicates that the expected internal rate of return for the project, based on current projections, is 0.51%, less than 1%. Under the look back 10 years from now, the actual data will be evaluated, and if the actual internal rate of return is shown to be more than 12%, there would be an adjustment in the TIF funding that's available. If it's 12% or less, then there won't need to be any adjustment. So the look back is now completed. The second issue that was still outstanding involved the procedure that will be used to accept the stormwater management facilities. This agreement has a fairly detailed two-step process built into it now that will govern the process for accepting the stormwater management improvements. If you'd like to talk about it, we can. It's fairly technical, but Rodney and I both spent a lot of time making sure that it would be a process that would assure the city that it would not release all of the surety it's holding until the stormwater ponds are completed, and there's going to be a 36-month period during which they will be maintained before we get to final acceptance. So that work is now done, and again, I'd be happy to get into the details if you're interested. And finally, the last issue that was still outstanding was a request from the developer to build into the agreement some kind of a provision that would commit the city to extending the life of the TIF district if during the current statutory term of the district it doesn't generate enough revenue to pay the municipal revenue obligation. And we took the position in our discussions with the developer that we didn't want to include that in the agreement, and they ultimately agreed to that. So there really is there is language in the agreement that acknowledges that there is a statutory process that allows for the extension, but there is no commitment by the city to agree to that. That's a decision that will be made in the future. So those were the three outstanding issues. They've all been addressed now. I think we've covered all of the other aspects of the agreement in the earlier meetings, so be happy to talk about anything you'd like to talk about.
I assume Director Weiss is happy with or comfortable with the utility side of things. I know
She's been involved in her pieces of it. Admittedly, there's a timing of when the utilities have to be put in related to through Elk Opening Drive. She certainly played a role in monitoring that aspect of it.
Anybody else have any other questions on that? As long, I mean, with you guys being comfortable with it, that's...
It's actually, I would say it's one of the, it's one of the most finely tuned development agreements I've seen in my time doing this kind of work. We really got into the weeds on every issue to try and make sure that we addressed all of the TIF issues and other development agreement issues in a way that would be workable for the city, protect the city, but also, we were trying to address some complicated issues from the developer's perspective as well, and from Stoughton Utilities' perspective in terms of the different phases of development, what needs to be in, before they can move on to the next phase. So there was a lot of work that went into that, and I'd say Stoughton Utilities, the planning department, financial folks, the developer, all worked pretty hard to get this agreement to the point where it is today. And the developer's position is they're ready to proceed, I think, with this agreement. They didn't get everything they asked for, but yeah, it's pretty finely tuned development agreement, I would say.
All right.
Motion to move it forward to council.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other questions, discussion? Thank you for the due diligence on all of that. I think it's better to be prepared for it than try and work on the fly. So, all right, no other questions, then all in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 Are any opposed? All right, we'll recommend the development to council tonight yet. All right, next item up, resolution authorizing the mayor to submit a grant application for a workforce innovation grant, round 2.
So this one would be, we've been trying to move forward on the Innovation Center, and we had applied for a couple grants unsuccessfully, and we have an opportunity to reapply for one of them. And basically, the resolution would be to authorize and pay Gary Becker to write that grant. Currently, we don't have any money in the actual budget to do it, so I think this one would come out of the, what do we decide, out of the fund balance?
Those are two different resolutions.
Yeah,
But yes, the recommendation is fund balance.
in which we have a healthy fund balance.
I would move to approve that, for the mayor to submit a grant application for workforce innovation grant. I think it's an exciting project.
Yep.
Recommend to council, I should say.
Second.
All right. Any other questions, discussion? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Or any opposed? All right, we'll make that recommendation to council for tonight's agenda. Next item up is resolution authorizing funding for 2022 services provided by Becker Professional Services LLC for economic development projects. Is this related to the last one, Mayor?
It's a little bit different. On this one, there's 3 different categories of work. One would be for the RDA, one would be for additional innovation center work, and then another one for general economic development.
Yep.
So the RDA one is pretty much described in here on what he would do to update the redevelopment plan. Right now, they're going through and they're collecting information from business owners around the railroad corridor. They want to gather that information and maybe put together a plan on that area and any other areas that we might decide to do or a future project with. And then we also have some things for the Innovation Center. We do have a board of directors that we meet, and we're just looking for some additional resources. Right now, the school district's really not in a position to fund it. We hope that will change going forward. They're not really set up kind of structurally in order to be eligible to prepare for, be eligible for some of the grants. The city is, so we're kind of taking the lead on this, and we're hoping at some point they may be able to pick up the ball and run with it, but we're trying to keep this thing moving forward. And certainly there's an investment that would need to be made. The general economic development, that would be really helping businesses. So one of the things we've been doing and we'd like to continue is we've been touring buildings, especially in the downtown area, that we feel are underutilized, or they may be businesses in there that are looking for growth opportunities. And on an annual basis, we can write a WEDC grant for $250,000 to help those businesses. Last year, you might recall, we were able to secure $75,000 for Grant Inspired, but we really have to be able to pay Gary to do that kind of work. So that's basically what this proposal is right here.
Okay.
There's 3 segments to it. And once again, I think we would take this out of the fund balance as well. And I think what we would probably do is, going forward, we would try to get this part of our normal budgeting process. I think that some of this stuff we really didn't anticipate, doing this year. We're having some success. We're having other areas where we think we can have future success. But going forward, I think these will have to be budgeted items.
Okay,
Motion to approve.
very good.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any other questions, discussion on that? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Or any opposed? All right, we'll make that recommendation to council at a later meeting. last is resolution approving a pre-annexation agreement between City of Stoughton and ROB Real Estate Brokerage and Builders LLC.
But
I think I can give you a quick rundown.
Yep.
This is for the area along Acker Road and Taylor Lane. This is a very similar agreement for other areas we've pursued annexation, or they've pursued annexation with us. I think we've outlined consistently with other development proposals. If you've got any questions, this really just outlines the basic framework for us to be able to recover expenses related to the initial annexation aspects of the project before we enter into an agreement to undertake development.
Nope, they seem to have their kind of ducks in a row on that one already, for what we've looked at it with.
Yeah, commissioners and
development.
some have seen at least a concept plan, so
Yep.
yes, this will
Yep.
start the process for development.
Okay. Anybody have any questions, thoughts on this? All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay. Second on that?
Second.
All right. Any other questions, discussion? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we will recommend that one up to council. All right, I wasn't sure we were gonna get through the whole committee business, but we squeaked in. All right. Some future agenda items we've got are we'll see the March reports in the next meeting, and we've still got our future treatment of special assessments costs. Anybody else have any others that they wish to see on the agenda or in future? I think we're gonna have a busy time in here, at least with TIFs, developments, all of that sort of thing, so I think we'll run a tight docket for a little while. If nothing else, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All right, all in favor, or any other discussion, questions? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, meeting is adjourned.